After hitting it big with versatile big man Evan Mobley in the 2021 NBA Draft next season, the Cleveland Cavaliers are set to return with their young core composed of lottery picks Collin Sexton, Darius Garland, and Isaac Okoro, as well as newly re-signed big man Jarrett Allen. And despite all the promise that such young group of players have in store for the future, lineups which featured Sexton, Garland, Allen, and Okoro together on the floor last season were actually outscored by 3.4 points per 100 possessions, which even got worse to a minus 11.8 per 100 possessions when Larry Nance Jr. formed a 5-man lineup with those 4 guys on the floor. So whether it be because of inexperience or other factors, Cleveland's young core group had basically been struggling to generate offense together. But then came Koby Altman and the front office pulling the trigger on the Lauri Markkanen sign-in trade, locking up the 24-year-old 7-footer to a 4-year $67.4 million deal. While at first glance, some fans might be wondering why a team like the Cavs, who just spent a $100 million extension on Jarrett Allen, who also drafted the potentially generational talent in center/forward Evan Mobley, would even pay another 7-footer who his former team, the Chicago Bulls, were just so eagerly willing to let go. But if we look at the situation a little bit deeper, I think it could be much easier to understand why trading for Lauri Markkanen actually makes sense for the Cavs. So what's good, guys? It's Real Balls here, and today we'll look into how Lauri Markkanen fits with the Cavaliers' young core, why it was actually the right time for the front office to cash in on the Larry Nance Jr. deal, why we actually shouldn't be worried about his long-term fit with the Cavs' other young bigs, and finally, why this was actually a potentially great signing for the team. But before we move on, if you guys happen to enjoy content like this, please make sure to hit that like button, as it definitely helps the channel a lot. It only takes a second of your time, but it will be much appreciated. So let's get to it. For 3 straight seasons since LeBron James left for the Lakers in 2018, the Cavs have finished 24th, 25th, and 28th in offensive efficiency ranking around the league. But of course, this was kinda expected from a rebuilding team which had mostly young pieces whom they acquired from the lottery. And for sure, Collin Sexton had been continuously developing into one hell of a scorer, capping his 3rd NBA season, averaging 24.3 points per game on 47.5% shooting from the field and a solid 37% from deep. Darius Garland also made a pretty significant leap in year number 2, improving in almost every aspect of his game, most especially with his playmaking, averaging 17.4 points and 6 assists per game while draining almost 40% of his shots from behind the arc. And though it isn't necessarily reflected in the stat sheet, last year's top 5 pick Isaac Okoro has also shown some real potential to be a good two-way wing player in the future. Yeah, for sure, these guys are really solid pieces for a rebuilding franchise, but if the Cavs are gonna develop a really consistent half-court offense moving forward where pieces could actually flourish, I think they need to have some knockdown outside shooters who would be able to convert the shots which Darius Garland creates, and someone who spaces the floor to help open the driving lanes for Sexton and Okoro. And I think Lauri Markkanen is someone who could somehow make the pieces fit for the Cavs with that scenario in mind. While despite all the criticisms about his game, especially after he registered career-low numbers of 13.6 points and 5.3 rebounds last season, the thing is, Markkanen still actually shot 40% from deep on almost 6 3-point attempts per game, while putting up a 59% effective field goal rate, both of which are actually career highs for the 24-year-old forward. And to put it into context, no one in the entire Cavs roster other than Darius Garland attempted at least 5 3-pointers per game last season. So I mean, Markkanen's 40% from 3 and 5.8 attempts per game shows that this guy could immediately step in as the top floor spacing big man on a Cavs team who last season alone ranked 28th in 3-point attempts, 29th in 3-point conversions, and dead last in the league in 3-point percentage. And not to mention the fact that just a couple of seasons ago, Markkanen pretty much looked like the key building block for the Chicago Bulls or even a future star for the team, as he did average almost 19 points per game and played 32 minutes a night as a second-year player back in the 2018 to 2019 season, up until his numbers and minutes started to go down, also partly due to injuries. And not to mention the fact that he actually found his groove back into the Bulls rotation last season, up until the team acquired Nikola Vucevic at the trade deadline, which again altered his playing time. So looking at it, if placed in the right developmental environment, I think it's not hard to see that there's definitely a path for this young player to continue playing at a high level while being viewed as a potential star. But how about on the other end of the floor? Will Markkanen be able to replace Larry Nance's contributions for the Cavs, and will he actually have a clean fit alongside the team's other young big man? Well, the thing is, Markkanen still isn't much of a guy who you could really put in defensive matchups one-on-one in the perimeter, unlike Larry Nance, who even defended elite wing scorers. And for a 7-footer, Markkanen also doesn't grab a lot of boards. I mean, he did grab 9 rebounds a game 2 seasons ago, but his rebounding rate just plummeted down since then, all the way down to 5 rebounds a game last season. season. And among big men who played at least 2,500 minutes over the past 2 seasons, only Brook Lopez and Robert Covington have had smaller shares of grabbing available rebounds on the floor than Markkanen in the entire NBA. And if you come to think of it, Larry Nance's versatility was huge for the Cavs. He started 27 times as a power forward last season with Kevin Love sidelined to injury, but the guy was also capable of playing both forward spots coming off the bench. And basically, Nance was also able to develop into a pretty good passer, and as I mentioned earlier, he's a really versatile defender who can guard threes or fours. While for sure, at this point, Markkanen isn't as versatile or as useful as Larry Nance is for a contending team, but I think that's the exact reason why this actually works perfectly for the Cavs, because they just aren't a good team yet overall, which means Markkanen can progress just fine alongside the team's winning timeline. And again, going back to his offense, Markkanen is still a better scorer and shooter than Nance. Last season, Markkanen's 61.9 true shooting percentage even ranked in the top 50 of the league, and he still definitely has more room for two-way improvement considering that he's at least 4 years younger than Nance. But more than anything, I think it's Markkanen's ability to slide at the small forward position that should even be more valuable for the Cavs this time around, given the addition of Evan Mobley, who could potentially start at the 4 position alongside Jarrett Allen at the 5 in a huge Cavs frontcourt. And theoretically, Markkanen isn't totally alien to that concept. I mean, he actually played some significant minutes at small forward last season alongside Vucevic and Daniel Theis in Chicago. He actually logged in 125 minutes at the 3 spot, which is actually more than Larry Nance's minutes at the same position last season. And with Markkanen's shooting and ability to put the ball on the floor to attack closeouts, I think playing as a full-time wing actually makes sense for him. But I think the only question for the Cavs would be, could they actually hide Markkanen long enough on the perimeter in specific matchups where he has to defend elite wings who can actually create shots off the dribble? Personally, that's the only concern I have on Markkanen with the Cavs fit-wise, but if any, I think Coach Bickerstaff should still be able to find some meaningful minutes for Markkanen to play alongside either one of Mobley or Jarrett Allen. Well, I mean, playing Mobley at the 5 spot together with a capable stretch 4 like Markkanen, most ideally against second unit backcourt, should definitely unlock a lot of offensive opportunities for the Cavs, and depending on the matchup, I'm also expecting a lot of scenarios where we can see Jarrett Allen, Mobley, and Markkanen at the floor all at the same time, with Markkanen playing as the small forward, similar to how Larry Nance functioned as a 3 in big lineups for the Cavs last season. And given how all 3 big men have kind of varying skill sets alongside one another, it's actually very easy imagining scenarios wherein Jarrett Allen and Mobley could serve as rim protectors both in the paint and in the perimeter, while Markkanen takes care of things on the opposite end. So overall, I think Markkanen's fit in the big Cavs frontcourt shouldn't be as problematic as it seems. But again, some fans might still be wondering why trade Larry Nance now and why pay some significant long-term money to a guy whom the Chicago Bulls pretty much happily ushered out into the trade market. I mean, for sure, Larry Nance had one of the best value contracts for the Cavs last season, and he still has 2 seasons left on his deal on a declining pay structure which equals to only more than $20 million until 2023, which is definitely an excellent deal for a quality frontcourt reserve like Nance, who also acts as an occasional starter. But the thing is, I think the Cavs have always seen his contract as a good asset ever since the day they signed him to that deal, and I mean, the Cavs were basically running out of time to cash in on his value, so I think it just made sense for them to pull the trigger at this point to get assets in return while they still can. While most definitely, Nance brings great value in a reasonable contract, but his play would be very much more useful in a team like Portland as compared to a rebuilding team like the Cavs. And if any, the arrival of Evan Mobley just signaled an even deeper focus on young pieces for the franchise moving forward. I mean, for sure, the Cavs could have just opted to grab Derrick Jones Jr. and a protected first-round pick from Portland in return for Nance, and from there, they could have just reverted back to free agency next summer. But again, who would they be able to sign next season? The Cavs aren't exactly a top free agent destination yet, so I think it was just the right call to turn Larry Nance into a player contract with solid value like Markkanen instead. And looking at it, I think Markkanen's sign-and-trade deal isn't actually that bad as some people think, cause he'll pretty much earn the same annual salary as guys like Davis Bertans and Marcus Morris. I mean, $16 million a year for a 24-year-old guy with so much potential to develop seems like good value to me when other teams are paying the same amount to older guys with pretty much lesser upside at this point. And yeah, for sure, it's pretty understandable why a lot of people still aren't sold on Markkanen given all the expectations after he was drafted as the 7th overall pick 4 years ago. But I think betting on guys like him is still the type of move that a rebuilding team like the Cavs can make, especially when the team's still projected to have a clean cap sheet for the next few years, which means signing Markkanen shouldn't limit their spending flexibility in the future. And if any, Markkanen is only 24, so he's pretty much on the same timeline as the Cavs' other young core pieces. And so for Cavs fans, I think the optimism here should lie on the fact that, given a fresh start, this guy who just came fresh off the most efficient shooting season of his career should be able to establish himself as a key long-term piece for this young Cavs roster, along with guys like Sexton, Garland, Mobley, Allen, and Okoro moving forward. So what do you guys think of the Lauri Markkanen sign-in trade? How do you project this move to affect the Cavs rebuild? Feel free to drop your thoughts in the comment section below, and if you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing as well. Again, this is Rero Balls, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.